Businessman follows his son without him knowing and is shocked by what he sees. Michael Reynolds had felt something was off for weeks. His 16-year-old son, Ethan, once talkative and dedicated to his studies, now barely spoke during dinner, and his grades had plummeted alarmingly. The school secretary had already called 3 times that month. It was when he found a strange receipt in his son's jacket pocket that Michael made a decision that would forever change their relationship. The crumpled paper showed a considerable amount spent on school supplies, far more than Ethan would need for himself. Something didn't add up. That afternoon, instead of attending his investor meeting, Michael cancelled his appointments and decided to follow his son after school. His private driver, George, a man in his late 50s who had worked for the family for over a decade, discreetly trailed the bus Ethan had boarded a few blocks behind. The vehicle was heading in the opposite direction of their Beverly Hills mansion in New York City. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Reynolds?" George asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. The boy might not like knowing he's being followed. "I don't care if he likes it or not, George," Michael replied, adjusting his expensive tie with restless fingers. "I need to know what's going on. He's been acting strange, coming home late. His grades are tanking. And now this. Receipt. It could be drugs, bad influences." The bus stopped in a neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The contrast was stark. The grand mansions of Beverly Hills were long gone, replaced by modest, sometimes unfinished homes with exposed bricks. Ethan stepped off the bus, his backpack seemingly heavier than usual. Michael asked George to park the car at a distance. "Wait here," he ordered, adjusting his sunglasses to avoid recognition. The businessman followed his son on foot, keeping a safe distance. Ethan walked with purpose, as if he knew the way well. After a few minutes, the boy stopped in front of an old building with peeling, graffiti-covered walls. A makeshift sign at the entrance read, "New Paths Community Center." Michael's chest tightened as he watched his son step inside. What was Ethan doing there? He waited a few minutes before approaching the entrance. Peering discreetly through the street-facing window, the sight left him breathless. His son seated in front of a makeshift blackboard, explaining math to about 15 children of varying ages, all hanging on his every word. The shock was instant. Ethan, his son who barely scraped by in school, was there, teaching with a confidence Michael had never seen before. The boy smiled, gestured, seemed like a different person, alive, passionate about what he was doing. "First time here?" A woman's voice interrupted his thoughts. Michael turned, startled. A silver-haired woman with a kind smile watched him. "Pardon?" "I asked if it's your first time at the community center," she repeated, extending her hand. "I'm Mrs. Gladys, the volunteer coordinator. Are you here for the adult literacy class? It's down the hall." "No, Michael cleared his throat, unsure what to say. "I was just looking around. A friend told me about the work you do here." "Oh, wonderful. We always need volunteers and donations," Mrs. Gladys said, her eyes bright with hope. "Unfortunately, we're about to close. The building's owner is selling and we have nowhere to go." Michael looked back at the room where Ethan was teaching. A girl about 10 years old raised her hand to answer a question, and when she got it right, Ethan celebrated as if it were a major achievement. The other children clapped. "That young man seems like a great teacher," Michael commented, trying to sound casual. "Ethan?" Mrs. Gladys smiled proudly. "He's our guardian angel. He showed up about 8 months ago, offering to help with tutoring. The kids adore him. It's amazing how patient he is, especially since we know his life isn't easy." Michael swallowed hard. What did Mrs. Gladys know about his son that he didn't? "What do you mean?" "Well, he never talks much about himself, but from what I gather, his mother passed away a few years ago. And his father is a very busy man, one of those who barely has time for family." She spoke without realizing the impact of her words. "Ethan says he understands that his father works so hard to give him a good life, but you can tell the boy misses attention, you know." Each word felt like a stab to Michael's chest. The image his own son had of him was that of an absent man concerned only with work and money. And the worst part, he couldn't deny Mrs. Gladys was right. After the death of his wife, Sarah, who'd suffered a sudden aneurysm 5 years ago, Michael had thrown himself even deeper into work. The construction company he founded became one of the largest in the country, with projects in several major cities. Meanwhile, raising Ethan had fallen mostly to hired help, and as he grew older, the boy had become increasingly independent. Or perhaps, Michael thought bitterly, he'd simply given up competing with spreadsheets and meetings for his father's attention. "Are you all right?" Mrs. Gladys asked, noticing Michael's sudden pallor. "Yes, just a little tired." He forced a smile. "I should go, but I'll come back another day to learn more about the project." "We'd be delighted to have you," she smiled. "And if you know anyone who could help us with a new space, we'd be very grateful." Michael nodded and left quickly. He needed to process what he'd just learned. His son, whom he'd believed was involved in something harmful, was actually spending his free time helping underprivileged children. On the way back to his car, he passed a park. He sat on a bench, alone, watching the sky begin to darken. How had he not noticed what was happening? When had he become so absent from his son's life that he no longer knew him? George found him still sitting on the park bench, staring blankly. "Mr. Reynolds, is everything all right?" I was worried. "No, George, it's not all right," he answered honestly. "But it will be. I need to make some calls." That night when Ethan came home, Michael had already formed a plan. He wouldn't confront his son immediately, but would start rebuilding their relationship. He watched the teenager enter quietly, as if trying not to be noticed. "Hi, Dad," Ethan said when he saw him on the living room couch, unusual for that hour. "Hi, son. How was your day?" Michael tried to sound casual, though his heart raced. Ethan shrugged, surprised by the sudden interest. "Fine. I was thinking we could go out to dinner tomorrow. What do you say? It's been a while since we talked properly." The teenager eyed him skeptically. "Don't you have a meeting tomorrow? Friday always has a meeting." Michael felt the weight of that remark. His son already expected to be sidelined. "I cancelled. Thought it'd be good for us to spend some time together." Ethan seemed uncomfortable, as if unsure how to handle this new version of his father. "Well, I kind of already have plans tomorrow." "Oh, that's okay." Michael tried to hide his disappointment. "Maybe over the weekend then." "Sure," Ethan replied without much enthusiasm. "I'm going to head up. I have homework." Michael watched his son walk away. The path ahead would be harder than he'd imagined. Trust had been broken, and it would take much more than a dinner to rebuild it. In the days that followed, Michael began quietly investigating the community center. He discovered the place served about 50 children and some adults, offering everything from tutoring to literacy classes. The building really would be sold in less than a month, and the project had no resources to relocate. Meanwhile, his attempts to reconnect with Ethan continued to be met with suspicion. The teenager clearly didn't know how to react to his father's sudden interest in his life. One particularly frustrating evening, after yet another failed attempt to talk to his son, Michael decided to take more direct action. He waited until Ethan was asleep and quietly entered his room. He knew he was invading his son's privacy, but concern outweighed his hesitation. He needed to understand what was really going on. At the bottom of a drawer, he found a notebook that didn't seem to be for school. When he opened it, he discovered detailed notes about each child in the program. Their names, ages, specific struggles, progress, and even family situations. There was also an envelope containing receipts for school supplies and a small amount of cash, along with a note, "Family contributions, April." Michael's heart ached. His son wasn't just volunteering, he was spending his allowance on supplies for the kids and managing the small contributions some families could make. On the last page of the notebook, he found something that took his breath away, a letter Ethan had written but never sent. "Dear Dad, I wish you could see what I'm doing. I know you'd probably say I'm wasting my time, that I should focus on my studies to be successful like you, but I've never felt as useful as I do in the afternoons I spend at the community center. There I feel like I'm making a difference in someone's life. When Sarah, who's 8, read her first full sentence, or when Tyler finally understood fractions after weeks of trying, I realized maybe I've found my calling. I wish I could share this with you, but I know you wouldn't understand." You always say success is measured by achievements and results, and that's important, but I've learned it can also be measured by the smiles we create and the lives we touch. Maybe one day, I'll have the courage to show you this side of me. With love, Ethan. Michael let the tears flow freely. His son was afraid to share something so beautiful with him, fearing his disapproval. What kind of father had he become? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The next morning, Michael woke up determined to change the course of things. He couldn't simply reveal he'd discovered Ethan's secret, but he also couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. In his office, he called a meeting with his top executives. "I want to start a foundation," he announced bluntly, "a non-profit tied to our construction company to support educational projects in underserved communities." Robert, his longtime friend and financial director, looked at him in surprise. "Michael, this is unexpected. Since when are you interested in social responsibility?" "Since now," he replied firmly. "We already have more than enough profits. It's time to give back." "It's a great initiative for the company's image," Catherine, the marketing director, remarked, already envisioning possibilities. "I don't want this to be a marketing strategy," Michael cut in. "I want it to be genuine. And the first project we'll support is already set." After presenting his plans, Michael went to the legal department to start the paperwork. Then he contacted a real estate agent. "I need a property in the Queens neighborhood, preferably close to Northern Boulevard. Space for classrooms, a common area, a cafeteria, and I want to close the deal as soon as possible." "That might take time, Mr. Reynolds," the agent replied. "Properties with those features aren't easy to find, especially on short notice." "Double your commission if you find one in a week," Michael offered, "and an extra bonus if we can close the deal in 2. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. Ethan was in the kitchen making a sandwich. "Hey, son." Michael smiled, noticing how tired the teenager looked. "Tough day." "A little," Ethan answered vaguely. "Exams are coming up." Michael nodded, knowing it wasn't just that. "I'm thinking of making some changes to the company," he mentioned, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Creating a foundation for social projects. What do you think?" Ethan looked at his father with genuine surprise. "You? A social foundation?" The disbelief in his son's voice stung, but Michael knew he deserved it. "Yes, me." He tried to sound casual. "I've been thinking we have resources that could help a lot of people. Education, mostly." Ethan studied his father's face for a moment, as if searching for a sign this was a joke. "That's cool, I guess," he finally said. "But why? I mean, you always said charity doesn't fix systemic problems and that creating jobs is what matters." "People change, Ethan." Michael leaned against the kitchen counter. "Sometimes we realize we were wrong about certain things." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Ethan seemed unsure how to process this new side of his father. "If you know of any project that needs support, I'm open to suggestions," Michael ventured. For a moment he saw a spark in his son's eyes, as if he was about to share a secret. But just as quickly, the light faded. "I don't know any," Ethan lied, "but I can look online if you want." "That'd be great," Michael smiled, masking his disappointment. "Rebuilding trust would take time. I'll be working in the office for a bit. We have dinner on Sunday, don't forget. Your Aunt Linda is visiting." Ethan nodded and headed upstairs to his room, leaving Michael with his thoughts. The distance between them felt like a chasm, but at least now he had a plan to start building a bridge. The following week, Michael got the call he'd been waiting for. "Mr. Reynolds, we found a property that might interest you. An old private school that closed 2 years ago. It's a bit run down, but the structure is solid and has everything you asked for. I want to see it today." The place was perfect. Just 3 blocks from the current community center, it had 8 classrooms, a central courtyard, an industrial kitchen, and even a small library. It would need renovations, but it could become an excellent educational space. "What's the asking price?" Michael asked, already envisioning the possibilities. 1.2 million. The owner is eager to sell. Offer $1 million in cash, closing the deal in a week. If he accepts, add another 200,000 to start renovations immediately. While the agent negotiated, Michael hired a team of architects and engineers from his own construction company, instructing them to prepare an emergency renovation plan. "I want everything done in 3 weeks," he ordered. "Work in shifts if you have to." 3 weeks is impossible, Mr. Reynolds, the team lead argued. "A project like this usually takes months." "Nothing is impossible when you have the right resources," Michael said firmly. "Triple the team, I'll pay overtime. But I want this place up and running by the deadline I set." The next day, the broker brought the news. The owner had accepted the offer. Construction could begin immediately. As plans for the new community center moved forward, Michael kept watching Ethan from a distance. The teenager was spending less and less time at home, dividing his days between school, the social project, and, Michael discovered, a part-time job at a fast food place in the mall. His son, who had everything materially, was working to help others. The pride Michael felt was immense, but it came with deep sadness. Why didn't Ethan feel he could share this with him? One afternoon, he decided to visit the fast food place where his son worked. He sat at a discreet table, watching from afar as Ethan served customers with politeness and efficiency, even when some were rude. A co-worker approached him. "Ethan, you look exhausted. Did you not sleep again?" "I'm fine, Ashley, just stayed up late preparing today's lessons." "Those kids are lucky to have you, but you need to take care of yourself too." Ethan smiled, but Michael could see the dark circles under his son's eyes. He was pushing himself too hard, juggling too many responsibilities. As a father, he had to do something before Ethan burned out. That night, Michael waited for his son to come home. It was past midnight when he heard the door open quietly. Ethan walked in slowly, clearly drained. "Ethan?" Michael called from the living room, where he pretended to watch TV. The teenager nearly jumped. "Dad, why are you still up?" "I could ask you the same thing," Michael said, trying not to sound accusatory. "You've been coming home very late lately." "I was at a friend's house studying," Ethan lied, avoiding his father's gaze. Michael took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to confront his son, to say he knew everything, but the fear of damaging their fragile relationship even further stopped him. "Son, you know you can come to me for anything, right?" Ethan seemed uncomfortable with the question. "Of course, Dad. I mean it," Michael said, standing and stepping closer. "I know I haven't been the most present father these past few years, but I want to change that. I want to be there for you, to support you in whatever you need." Ethan's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment Michael thought he might open up, but the teenager just nodded. "Thanks, Dad. I'm really tired. Can I go to bed?" "Of course. Get some rest." As he watched his son climb the stairs, Michael knew he had to be patient. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. The following week, a heavy storm hit New York City. Michael was in a meeting when he got an urgent message from Mrs. Gladys, whom he'd kept in discreet contact with. "Center flooded. Kids can't have class. Ethan is desperate." Without a second thought, Michael cancelled all his appointments and drove to the location. The scene was heartbreaking. The old roof had collapsed in several spots and rainwater flooded the rooms. Ethan, drenched, was guiding the children to save books and supplies. Michael watched from a distance, his heart breaking at the sight of his son's desperation as he tried to stay calm for the little ones who cried over their ruined notebooks. "It's going to be okay," Ethan kept saying, though his voice betrayed his own doubt. "We'll find another place." One of the boys, no older than 7, clung to Ethan's leg. "Teacher, is it over? Are we not going to have class anymore?" Ethan knelt in the ankle-deep water and hugged the child. "Of course it's not over, Tyler. We'll just take a break until we find a new place, okay? I promise I won't abandon you." Michael could no longer hold back. He stepped into the flooded hall, ignoring the water soaking his expensive suit. "Do you need help?" he offered, approaching the group. Ethan looked at his father in surprise, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I heard what happened and came to see if I could help." Michael tried to sound casual, though his heart raced. It was the moment of truth. The silence that followed was deafening. The children stared curiously at the man in the wet suit, whom Ethan had called Dad. Mrs. Gladys, who had just entered carrying towels, stopped in surprise at the door. "Mr. Reynolds," she asked, recognizing him. "You know each other?" Ethan asked, confused, looking from one to the other. Michael took a deep breath. It was time to be honest. "Yes, we know each other. Son, I know about the project. I know you've been teaching here for months." Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something that broke. Michael's heart. Betrayal. "You followed me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Is that why this sudden interest in my life? Were you spying on me?" "Ethan, How long?" the teenager interrupted, tears mixing with the rainwater still dripping from his hair. "How long have you known?" "A few weeks," Michael admitted, feeling the gaze of the children and Mrs. Gladys on them. "I found a receipt in your jacket and got worried. I thought you might be in trouble." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Of course, because that's the only possibility, right? That I was doing something wrong. It never crossed your mind that I might be doing something good, something important." "That's not true, son. When I found out what you were doing, I felt a pride I'd never felt before." "Then why didn't you say anything? Why keep pretending?" Michael didn't have a good answer for that. "I was afraid you'd pull away even more. I wanted to find a way to help without you thinking I was interfering." Ethan shook his head, clearly hurt. "So all that talk about social foundations, about change, was all because of this, to please me?" "Not just to please you," Michael replied sincerely. "You're the one who inspired me to want to do more. Seeing your commitment to these kids made me question my own priorities." A distant thunder rumbled, and the lights flickered. One of the younger children started crying in fear. "Can we continue this conversation another time?" Mrs. Gladys suggested gently. "We need to get the children out of here before the storm gets worse." Michael nodded, grateful for the interruption. "My car is outside. I can take some of you." Ethan still seemed hurt, but his concern for the children won out. "Fine, let's organize this." With Michael's help, they managed to get all the children home safely. The tension between father and son remained, with Ethan answering only what was strictly necessary. When the last boy was dropped off, only the two of them were left in the car with George driving silently, aware of the tension. "Ethan, I'm truly sorry for not being honest with you," Michael began. "But I want you to know I plan to help the community center. I'm already working on it." "I don't need your help," Ethan replied curtly. "We've been managing fine so far." "The building is flooded and you'll be evicted in 2 weeks," Michael pointed out, trying to stay calm. "I know you're angry with me, and you have every right to be, but don't let your pride hurt those kids." The words hit Ethan like a punch. He knew his father was right, as much as he hated to admit it. "What do you suggest then?" he finally asked. "I have a proposal." Michael tried to contain the excitement in his voice. "But I'd like to introduce you and Mrs. Gladys together. Can we schedule it for tomorrow?" Ethan hesitated, but finally agreed. "Okay." Mrs. Gladys is usually at the center in the Ain al-Ma morning assessing the damage. "Great. And Ethan?" "Yeah. I'm really proud of you, not just for the project, but for everything. For being the kind of person who cares, who takes action. You're so much better than I ever was." The teenager didn't respond, but Michael saw a tear roll down his son's face before he turned to the window, pretending to watch the fading rain outside. The next morning, Michael and Ethan found Mrs. Gladys at the flooded community center. The elderly woman was trying to salvage what she could, but it was clear the place was uninhabitable. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm so glad you came," she greeted, trying to stay optimistic despite the circumstances. "Your son is an extraordinary young man, you know." "I know very well," Michael replied sincerely. "And that's why I'm here. I have a proposal for you." Michael pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Mrs. Gladys. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Open it, please." Inside the envelope were a set of keys and some documents. "I don't understand," she said, looking at the papers. "It's the address and keys to a new location for the community center," Michael explained. "It's 3 blocks from here, an old private school. It's twice the size of this place and is already being renovated. It'll be ready in 2 weeks." Ethan and Mrs. Gladys stared at Michael in shock. "What do you mean?" the teenager asked. "You bought a building?" "Technically, the foundation we're setting up bought it," Michael smiled. "It'll be called the New Paths Foundation, in honor of the name you already use." Mrs. Gladys began to cry, unable to hold back her emotions. "Mr. Reynolds, this is... I have no words. No need to thank me." Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing extraordinary work here. You deserve a proper space." Ethan remained silent, processing the information. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. "Is it just to impress me?" The question stung, but Michael understood where it came from. "No, son, I'm doing this because it's the right thing. Because I believe in the work you're doing." He paused. "And also because I want to be part of it if you'll let me." "What do you mean, be part of it?" Ethan asked, skeptical. "I'd like to get involved in the project, not just financially, but personally. Maybe help with the administrative side, or teach some entrepreneurship classes to the older kids." He looked at his son earnestly. "But only if you want me to, Ethan. I know this is your space, and I don't want to intrude." The teenager seemed conflicted. On one hand, he was still hurt by the invasion of privacy. On the other, he knew his father's help would be invaluable for the kids. "I need to think," he finally said. "Of course, take all the time you need." Michael turned to Mrs. Gladys. "In the meantime, I'd like to show you the new space. The construction team is already working, and it'd be good to get your input on how to arrange the rooms." The three of them walked together through the streets, still wet from the previous night's rain. When they reached the new building, even under construction, it was impossible not to be impressed. The potential was obvious. "Imagine how many kids we could help here," Mrs. Gladys remarked, amazed. "We could even offer vocational courses for parents." Ethan walked silently through the halls, touching the walls as if trying to absorb the reality of this new beginning. Michael watched from a distance, giving his son space to process everything. Finally, Ethan approached his father. "Why did you never tell me you cared about these things?" he asked, his voice quiet. "All this time I thought you only cared about profits and success." Michael sighed. "Because I didn't know any better, son. After your mother passed, I shut myself off to everything but work. It was easier that way. I didn't have to feel." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But seeing you take such a different path, one so much more human than mine, made me realize everything I was missing." Ethan studied his father's face, searching for signs of insincerity. He found none. "Do you really want to be part of this, or is it just a passing impulse?" "It's a commitment, Ethan, not just to the project, but to you." Michael placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I want to understand this part of your life. I want to know the real you, not just the image I created in my head." Something in Ethan's expression softened. "You'll have to learn patience. Some of these kids have a really hard time. I'll learn from you." Michael smiled. "You seem like a great teacher." A small smile formed on Ethan's lips, the first he'd directed at his father in a long time. "I guess I can give you a chance." It was a beginning, not a magical fix for years of distance, but a first step toward reconciliation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Ethan began building a new relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and mistrust. The teenager still carried wounds from years of emotional neglect, and Michael often caught himself falling back into old patterns. The grand opening of the New Paths Community Center was set for a sunny Saturday. Construction had finished, in record time, and the space was unrecognizable. Classrooms with new furniture, computers, a library stocked with hundreds of books, and a colorful playground for the kids. The night before the opening, Michael found Ethan alone in the building, putting the final touches in place. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, walking over to his son. Ethan shrugged, but his smile gave him away. "A little. The kids are so excited. Most of them have never had classes in a place this well-equipped. I'm sure it'll be a success." Michael looked around, admiring their work. "I've been thinking, maybe we should expand the project to include job training for parents. What do you think?" Ethan stared at his father, his expression a mix of surprise and admiration. Seriously? That would be amazing. A lot of the mums are breadwinners and struggle to find work because they lack qualifications. We could start with basic computer skills, office administration, some accounting. Michael grew animated. And maybe connect them with job opportunities at the construction company's partner firms. Dad, that would change these families' lives. Ethan was genuinely excited. We could even offer a small stipend during training so they can focus on studying. That's a great idea, Michael agreed, thrilled to see his son's enthusiasm. Let's include it in next semester's plan. Working together on the project, father and son were rediscovering each other. Michael, once obsessed only with financial results, was learning about empathy and human connection. Ethan, in turn, began seeing his father beyond the cold businessman stereotype he'd built in his mind. Opening day arrived, and the center was packed. Kids ran excitedly through the halls, exploring every corner of the new space. Parents gazed in awe at the facilities, hardly believing their children would have access to all of it for free. Mrs. Gladys, moved to tears, gave a short speech thanking everyone who had made the dream possible. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, the teenager seemed nervous but determined. When I started tutoring some kids, I never imagined it would lead to this. He looked around at the smiling faces. Each of you has taught me something important. You showed me that even with little, we can do so much. That education is the most powerful tool we have. Michael watched his son with immense pride. Ethan had become an extraordinary young man, despite his own failings as a father. I want to especially thank one person, Ethan continued, surprising Michael. My dad, who not only made this space possible, but recently taught me that it's never too late to start over, to admit mistakes and try to be better. Michael's eyes filled with tears. It was the first time Ethan had acknowledged him publicly since they'd begun this journey together. After the speech, while the kids enjoyed a snack prepared for the occasion, Michael approached his son. Thank you for what you said. It meant a lot to me. Ethan smiled. I just told the truth. He paused. You know, we still have a lot to work through, but I think we're on the right track. I think so too. Michael placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I'm learning more from you than I ever thought possible. The moment was interrupted by Tyler, the 7-year-old who had hugged Ethan on the day of the flood. Mr. Ethan, come see what I found in the library. There's a whole book just about dinosaurs. Ethan laughed. I'm coming, Tyler. He glanced at his father. Want to come? Tyler's obsessed with paleontology. He knows more about dinosaurs than most adults. I'd love to, Michael answered sincerely. As they walked together following the excited Tyler, Michael reflected on how his life had completely changed in just a few weeks. He had followed his son, fearing he'd find problems, and instead he'd found a better version of himself. But not everything was perfect. Despite their progress, tension still lingered between father and son. Years of emotional distance don't disappear overnight, and Michael knew he had to be patient. One afternoon, a few weeks after the opening, Michael arrived at the community center and found Ethan in a heated argument with Mrs. Gladys. We can't just let him in here, the teenager said, clearly upset. He has a violent record. What if he hurts one of the kids? Everyone deserves a second chance, Ethan, Mrs. Gladys argued calmly. Jamal served his time. He's trying to rebuild his life. He needs support, not more closed doors. Michael stayed back, not wanting to interrupt. Apparently, they were discussing an ex-convict who wanted to join the vocational courses they were about to start. What's going on? He asked when they finally noticed him. Mrs. Gladys explained the situation. Jamal, 24, had served 2 years in prison for robbery and was now looking for a fresh start. He wanted to take the computer course to improve his job prospects. I understand your concern, Ethan, Michael said after hearing both sides. But I agree with Mrs. Gladys. If we're truly committed to changing lives, we can't exclude those who need support the most. Ethan looked at his father indignantly. You don't get it. We have little kids here. What if he's dangerous? What if he isn't? Michael countered. What if denying him this one chance pushes him back into crime? We're not talking about a murderer, Ethan. He's a young man who made a mistake and paid for it. The teenager shook his head, frustrated. You're being naive. Not everyone deserves trust. Maybe, but I'm willing to take that risk. Michael paused, watching his son's expression. What would you have said if, when I discovered your secret, I had assumed the worst about you? The question hit Ethan hard. He knew his father was right, but the fear lingered. It's not the same. It's not exactly the same, but the principle is, Michael replied, stepping closer and placing a hand on his son's shoulder. We can take precautions. Jamal can start by only attending the adult classes in the evening when the kids aren't. Here, we can get to know him better before fully integrating him into the program. Ethan thought for a moment. Fine, but I'll keep an eye on him. At the first sign of trouble, he's out. Michael smiled, proud of his son's ability to reconsider. Fair enough. Mrs. Gladys watched the interaction between father and son with a quiet smile. It was clear how much both were growing through this partnership. Jamal began attending computer classes the following week. To Ethan's surprise, the young man was not only committed and respectful, but also incredibly skilled with computers. He had learned the basics in prison and absorbed new knowledge with impressive speed. After a few weeks, it was Ethan himself who suggested Jamal help maintain the center's computers, creating a paid job opportunity for him. You were right, Ethan admitted to his father one night as they walked home together. He really did. Need a chance. Michael smiled, once again amazed by his son's growth. You know what impresses me about you, Ethan? Your willingness to admit when you're wrong. That's rare, especially in someone so young. The teen shrugged, but it was clear he appreciated the praise. Guess I learned from someone. The bond between father and son continued to strengthen, though there were still tough moments. Michael still occasionally got lost in his work, forgetting important commitments. Ethan, in turn, still struggled to fully trust his father's intentions. One day, Michael came home to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table with a somber expression. Did something happen? He asked immediately, concerned. Ethan slid an envelope across the table. It came today. Michael opened it and found a letter from Columbia University. Ethan had been accepted into the education program. Son, this is wonderful, he exclaimed, genuinely happy. Why the long face? Isn't this what you wanted? Ethan hesitated before answering. It is, but I don't know if it's what you want for me. Michael felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Even after months of rebuilding their relationship, his son still feared his disapproval. Ethan, look at me. He waited until the teen met his eyes. What I want is your happiness. If education is what makes you happy, then that's exactly what I want for you. You always talked about me becoming a businessman, taking over the construction company someday. Because that's what I knew, the only path I could show you. Michael sat beside his son. But you've shown me there are so many ways to build something meaningful in life. You're already changing the world, Ethan, in a way I never could with all the buildings I've put up. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? Education isn't exactly the most prestigious degree. Prestige, Michael chuckled. I've seen the respect in those kids' eyes when they look at you. I've seen the admiration from parents when they realize how much their children are growing because of your work. That's real prestige, son. Ethan smiled, relieved. So I can accept. Of course you can. Let's celebrate. How about a special dinner tonight? That night marked another important milestone in their journey. Ethan finally began to believe that the change in Michael was genuine and lasting. Time passed, and the New Paths Community Center became a model of a successful social project. In addition to tutoring for children, it offered vocational courses for young adults, psychological support for vulnerable families, and even a small community business incubator. Ethan enrolled in college, dividing his time between studies and work at the center. Michael, in turn, completely reorganized his professional life, delegating more responsibilities so he could dedicate himself to the social project and, most importantly, to his relationship with his son. 1 year after the inauguration of the new space, during a celebration with the entire team and beneficiaries, Mrs. Gladys asked for everyone's attention. Today marks 1 year in this wonderful space, and I want to thank everyone who made this possible. She looked fondly at Michael and Ethan. "But most of all, I want to celebrate something even more special. The power of reconciliation and love." Michael and Ethan exchanged glances, surprised. "When I first met these two," Mrs. Gladys continued, "they could barely talk without tension. A father who had lost himself in work, a son who felt invisible. Today, I see one of the most beautiful partnerships I've ever witnessed." She walked over to a wall covered by a cloth. "That's why it's with immense joy that we unveil our new plaque." She pulled the cloth, revealing a bronze plaque that read, "New Paths Community Center, founded by Ethan and Michael Reynolds." Ethan looked at his father in surprise. Until then, Michael had kept his name discreetly separate from the project, wanting his son to receive the recognition. "Did you know about this?" the young man asked. Michael shook his head, equally surprised. "I had no idea." Mrs. Gladys smiled. "You built this together. It was only fair you be recognized together." That night, walking home after the celebration, father and son reflected on the journey they had taken. "You know what's funny?" Ethan remarked. "It all started because you were spying on me." Michael laughed. "Not my finest moment as a father, I admit. But if you hadn't done that, maybe we'd still be distant," the young man mused. "Sometimes awkward beginnings lead to the best destinations." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I still wonder how I didn't see what was happening sooner. How I could have been so blind to who you really are." "I think we all see what we're ready to see," Ethan said with a smile. "The important thing is that your eyes eventually opened." Michael wrapped his arm around his son's shoulders, a gesture that once would have been uncomfortable for both, but now felt natural. "You know what I'm most proud of in you, Ethan." "What?" "Your ability to forgive, to give me a second chance even after years of neglect. That's a strength you certainly didn't inherit from me." "Maybe from Mom," Ethan suggested, mentioning his late mother for the first time in a long while without unbearable pain. "Definitely from your mother," Michael said with a wistful smile. "She'd be so proud of the man you're becoming." They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. "Dad? Yeah? Thank you for following me that day." Michael squeezed his son's shoulder. "It was the best mistake I ever made." And so father and son continued their walk, not just through the streets of New York City, but through the journey of rediscovery and reconciliation they had begun on that fateful day when a businessman decided to follow his son and ended up finding his way back home. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing, a year and a half later, the New Paths Community Center had expanded beyond its initial expectations. What began as an after-school program for underprivileged children had grown into a full range of community services, vocational training, psychological counseling, free legal assistance, and even a small medical clinic that operated on Saturdays with volunteer professionals. Michael, who had previously dedicated nearly all his time to his construction company, now spent at least 3 days a week at the community center. His expertise in administration and his connections in the business world had been crucial to the project's financial sustainability. Ethan, now in his second year of college studying education, had become an inspiration for the neighborhood youth. Many teenagers who had never considered college a real possibility in their lives now dreamed of following in his footsteps. One Friday afternoon, Michael was in his office at the construction company when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Reynolds, this is the Department of Education. The secretary would like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the New Paths Community Center model. There's interest in replicating it in other parts of the city." The news was astonishing. Official recognition of their work meant an opportunity to impact even more lives. That evening, Michael shared the news with Ethan over dinner. "That's amazing, Dad," the young man exclaimed, genuinely excited. "Imagine how many kids we could help if the model is replicated." "Yes, but I have some concerns," Michael admitted. "When projects like ours become public policy, they often lose their essence. I wonder if they could maintain the same level of personalized care, the close follow-up we provide for each family." Ethan nodded, understanding his father's worry. We could suggest starting with a pilot program in just 1 or 2 communities first, and maybe offer training for the teams who will implement it. Great idea, Michael smiled, proud of his son's maturity. I'll propose that in the meeting. Would you like to join? Ethan's eyes widened. Me? In a meeting with the education secretary? Of course. You're the original founder of the project. No one understands its core values better than you. The smile that spread across the young man's face was worth all the money in the world to Michael. Seeing his son confident and recognized for his work was the greatest reward he could imagine. The meeting with the Department of Education was scheduled for the following week. Ethan was visibly nervous, constantly adjusting the tie his father had helped him pick out. Relax, Michael said as they waited in the lobby. You know this project better than anyone. Speak from the heart, just like you do with your students. The advice worked. During the meeting, Ethan spoke passionately about the principles guiding the community center's work. Individualized attention, family involvement, and the holistic approach that went beyond tutoring to address the multiple needs of at-risk children. The secretary, Dr. Patricia Wilson, listened carefully to every word. It's truly inspiring to see someone so young with such clarity of purpose, she remarked, impressed. What motivated you to start this project, Ethan? The young man hesitated for a moment, glancing at his father before answering. In school, I always had everything I needed to learn. Good teachers, quality materials, time to study. He paused. One day, during a school volunteer project in an underserved neighborhood, I met brilliant kids who didn't even have the basics. I saw one boy splitting a pencil in half to share with his friend. I realized the problem wasn't a lack of ability or interest, but a lack of opportunities. Michael listened carefully. It was the first time he'd heard the story in detail. At first, I started by helping just 2 kids after school, Ethan continued. Soon it became 5, then 10. I found an abandoned space and began using it. For classes, some parents heard about it and started bringing their children too. And your father supported the initiative from the beginning? Asked the secretary. Ethan and Michael exchanged a knowing glance. Let's just say it was gradual support, Ethan replied diplomatically, drawing a smile from his father. The meeting ended with an agreement. The Department of Education would implement the model in 2 communities as a pilot project, with direct supervision from Ethan and Michael to ensure the essence was preserved. On the way back, Michael was lost in thought. What's on your mind, Dad? Ethan asked, noticing his silence. How things change. Michael smiled. 2 years ago, I was immersed in luxury projects, building condos most people could never afford. Now I'm helping design an educational program for underserved communities. And the most amazing part is, I've never felt more fulfilled professionally. Ethan squeezed his father's arm affectionately. It's never too late to find a new purpose. Thanks to you. Michael looked at him sincerely. I always believed I was building a legacy with my ventures. Little did I know my true legacy would be you and what we've built together. The implementation of the pilot projects brought new challenges. Ethan and Michael began splitting their time between the original community center and the new units, taking shape. The young man, in addition to his college studies, took on the role of educational coordinator, training the teams who would work in the new spaces. Michael, meanwhile, used his management experience to structure administrative processes, ensuring the financial sustainability of the projects even with limited public funding. Amid this new phase, an unexpected situation arose. Jamal, the former inmate who had become responsible for the community center's IT area, asked for a private conversation with Michael. Mr. Reynolds, I need to talk about something important, he began, visibly nervous. I've received a job offer from a tech company. The salary is really good, more than I ever dreamed of making. Michael smiled, genuinely happy for the young man's opportunity. Jamal, that's wonderful. Exactly what we hoped for when we started the vocational courses. You more than deserve this chance. The problem is, I don't want to abandon the project, Jamal confessed. These kids, this place, they changed my life. When everyone shut doors on me, you gave me a chance. I don't know if I can just walk away. Michael looked at him with admiration. Jamal embodied exactly what the project aimed for. not just providing technical skills, but transforming lives and creating citizens committed to their community. What if we could find a way to do both? Michael suggested. Maybe you could work at the company during the day and dedicate a few hours a week as a volunteer, teaching programming to the teens in the program. Jamal's eyes lit up. You think that's possible? I'm sure of it. In fact, Michael paused, an idea forming in his mind. What if we proposed a partnership to this company? They could sponsor a more advanced computer lab at the center, and in return they'd have access to the top students for internships and future hires. Jamal grinned, excited by the possibility. A bridge between the community center and the job market. That would be revolutionary. Exactly. Michael nodded. And you would be the perfect bridge between the two worlds. The idea was put into action immediately. To Michael's surprise, the company not only accepted the proposal but expanded it, offering to provide volunteer instructors and grow the technology training program. When Ethan heard the news, he was overjoyed. Dad, do you realize what this means? We're creating a direct path from social vulnerability to skilled employment. The young man could barely contain his excitement. This could completely change the future of these communities. Michael smiled, sharing his son's enthusiasm. You know what amazes me the most about all this? How one small action can set off so many changes. You started by teaching 2 kids, and look how far we've come. Ethan paused for a moment. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't followed me that day. I think about that every day, Michael admitted. I'd still be blind to what truly matters. I'd still believe success is only measured by material achievements. The young man hugged his father, a gesture that had become natural between them. I think fate had plans for both of us. The partnership with the tech company was just the beginning. Soon, other businesses in the area took interest in the model. A bank offered financial literacy courses. A hospital network provided professionals to give talks on preventive health. A publisher donated hundreds of books for the center's libraries. What had started as one teenager's solitary initiative was growing into a movement, bringing together different sectors of society around a shared goal, offering real opportunities to those who needed them most. Amid this expansion, Ethan and Michael stayed true to the principles they'd set from the start. Individualized attention, recognizing each person's potential, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves a chance, no matter their background or past. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the New Paths Community Center office, Ethan found a yellowed envelope at the bottom of a drawer. When he opened it, he realized it was the letter he'd written to his father years ago, but never had. The courage to deliver. What's this? Michael asked, noticing the nostalgic look on his son's face. Ethan hesitated before handing him the paper. Something I wrote a long time ago. I think you should read it. Michael immediately recognized the letter he'd found in his son's room that fateful night when he'd invaded his privacy out of worry. He pretended to read it for the first time, letting genuine emotion show on his face. Ethan, his voice faltered. I never had the courage to show you, the young man confessed. I was afraid of how you'd react, that you wouldn't understand what this project meant to me. Michael took a deep breath, deciding it was time to be completely honest. Son, I need to confess something. I'd already seen this letter before. Ethan looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Back then, when I started noticing changes in your behavior, I got really worried. One night, I went into your room while you were asleep and found this envelope. The young man's eyes widened in surprise. You went through my room? Yes, and I'm not proud of it, Michael said honestly. But reading those words was one of the most transformative moments of my life. I realized how much I'd drifted from you, how much I'd lost by being so obsessed with work and success. Ethan processed the information silently. So you knew everything before you even followed me? Not everything. I knew about the project, but I had no idea of its scale, how deeply you were dedicating yourself, sacrificing for it. That's why I decided to follow you, to really understand what was happening. The young man shook his head, still processing the revelation. Why did you never tell me? Shame, mostly, Michael admitted. It's not easy to admit I invaded my own son's privacy. And later, when we started reconnecting, I didn't want to bring up something that might create more distance between us. Ethan stayed silent for a long moment. Michael waited, fearing he'd made a mistake by revealing the truth after so long. Finally, the young man spoke. You know what's the most ironic part of all this? That your invasion of privacy ended up bringing us closer. Michael looked at him surprised. You're not angry? Maybe I would have been back then, Ethan admitted. But looking back, I see it was the turning point for both of us. Sometimes the means aren't perfect, but the result is worth it. The businessman felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd carried that secret for so long, afraid it might ruin the relationship they'd rebuilt with such effort. Thank you for understanding, son, and I promise there'll be no more secrets between us. Ethan smiled, putting the letter back in the envelope. I think we should frame this as a reminder of where we came from and how far we've come together. The idea was implemented. The framed letter took pride of place on the main office wall of the community center, alongside photos documenting the project's evolution, from the first makeshift classes to the network of centers now spread across the city. The following months brought more growth and recognition. The New Paths model began being replicated in other American cities. Journalists started seeking Ethan and Michael for stories about education and social projects. Universities invited them to speak about education's impact on social transformation. Amid this whirlwind of activity, father and son always made time for what truly mattered, being present in each other's lives and in the lives of those they'd committed to helping. One afternoon, while overseeing the opening of the project's newest location, Michael watched his son from afar. Ethan, now 19, patiently guided a team of new volunteers, sharing the work's philosophy with the same passion he'd shown from the beginning. Your son is truly extraordinary, commented a woman beside Michael, following his gaze. So young, yet already impacting so many lives. Yes, he is, Michael agreed proudly. You must have done something very right raising him, the woman continued. Michael smiled thoughtfully. Actually, he taught me the most important lessons, taught me to look beyond the obvious, to value what truly matters. The woman looked at him curiously. How so? Let's just say I was lost, focused only on material, achievements and status, Michael said, watching Ethan smile at an excited child approaching him. My son showed me that true success lies in the lives we touch, the differences we make in the world. The woman nodded understandingly. You know, Mr. Reynolds, few parents would have the humility to admit that, to let their children teach them. I learned the hard way, Michael confessed. I nearly lost what was most precious through pride and stubbornness. Thankfully, I got a second chance. As they spoke, Ethan approached with Tyler, now 9 years old, the first student Michael had seen that fateful afternoon at the abandoned station. Dad, Tyler has something to show you, Ethan announced, encouraging the boy. Shyly, Tyler handed Michael a folded paper. It's my essay, Uncle Michael. I got top marks. Michael carefully unfolded the paper. The title read, My Heroes. With emotion, he read the simple yet deeply touching text where the boy described how Ethan and Michael had transformed not only his education, but his entire outlook on the future. I used to think I'd never amount to anything, wrote Tyler, but Mr. Ethan showed me I can be whatever I want. And Uncle Michael proved that even people with lots of money can care about folks like us. With misty eyes, Michael hugged the boy. I'm so proud of you, Tyler. Keep going like this and you'll go far. The smile lighting up the child's face was worth more than any business achievement Michael had ever had. Later that day, as father and son walked back to the car, Ethan broke the silence. You know, Dad, sometimes I wonder what Mom would think of all this. They rarely mentioned Sarah, but when they did, it was no longer with the suffocating pain of the early years after her passing. She'd be bursting with pride, Michael replied with conviction, especially of you. Sarah always believed in the power of education to change lives. No wonder she was a university professor. Ethan smiled at the memory of his mother. Sometimes when I'm teaching, it feels like a part of her is with me, you know? Like I didn't just inherit her looks, but her passion for teaching too. I'm sure she is. Michael wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders. And I bet she's watching us right now, celebrating how we found our way back to each other. When they got home that night, Michael went to his office and opened a drawer he rarely visited. From it, he pulled out an old photo album. Sitting. On the couch, he flipped through the pages, stopping at one photo in particular. Sarah holding baby Ethan with Michael beside them, all three smiling at the camera. "What are you looking at?" Ethan asked, entering the room with 2 cups of tea. Michael showed him the photograph. "I was just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. Back then I had so many plans, so many ambitions. None of them included what we're doing now." "And do you regret it?" Ethan asked, sitting beside his father. "Not for a second." Michael smiled. "I found out my true calling wasn't building skyscrapers, but building opportunities. For people." Ethan examined more photos, pausing at one where he was about 10 years old, standing next to his father at a construction site. "I remember this day. It was the first time you took me to see one of your projects. I was so proud. I thought, you were the most important man in the world." "And what do you think now?" Michael asked curiously. Ethan closed the album, looking straight at his father. "That you're even more important than I imagined. Not because of the buildings you built, but because of the dreams you're helping build now." The words moved Michael deeply. His whole life, he'd chased recognition and success, never realizing the greatest recognition would come from his own son. "You know, Ethan, if I could go back in time and give the Michael in this photo some advice, do you know what I'd say?" "What?" "To pay more attention to the boy beside him, to understand that the greatest legacy he could build wasn't made of concrete and steel, but of love and example." Ethan rested his head on his father's shoulder, a gesture reminiscent of his childhood. "It's never too late to start over, Dad. You taught me that yourself." Michael smiled, grateful for his son's wisdom and for the second chance life had given him. A few days later, Michael received an unexpected call at his office. "Mr. Reynolds, this is the Committee for the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award. We'd like to inform you that you and your son have been nominated for this year's award for your work with the New Paths Project." The news took Michael by surprise. "I never imagined receiving recognition of this nature, so far removed from the traditional corporate world where I had always worked." When I shared the news with Ethan over dinner, the young man reacted with equal surprise. "Us? A social entrepreneurship? The award?" He shook his head in disbelief. "But there are so many projects with much more experience, people who've dedicated their entire lives to social causes." Apparently, the impact of the model we created and the speed of replication impressed the jury, Michael explained. "And the fact that we brought together different generations, complementary perspectives." Ethan thought for a moment. "If we win, I think we should use the prize to create a university scholarship fund for the students in our program. What do you think?" Michael smiled, once again struck by his son's generous heart. "I think it's a brilliant idea. And we could use the award's visibility to inspire others and businesses to invest in education." On the night of the ceremony, father and son walked nervously down the red carpet. Ethan, in his first tuxedo, seemed out of place among so many well-known figures from the business and social sectors. "Relax," Michael whispered, noticing his son's tension. "Just being here means we've already won." The event unfolded with moving speeches from people who had dedicated their lives to transforming realities. When the time came for the Social Entrepreneur of the Year category, Ethan instinctively gripped his father's hand. "And the winners are Michael and Ethan Reynolds from the New Paths Project." The auditorium erupted in applause. Father and son exchanged glances, surprised and moved, before stepping onto the stage. At the podium, Michael gave a brief speech. "This award represents far more than recognition for the work we've done. For me, personally, it symbolizes a journey of rediscovery." He looked at Ethan beside him. "It was my son who taught me the true meaning of social impact. While I was building buildings, he was building lives." Ethan took the microphone, visibly emotional. The New Paths Project was born from the simple belief that everyone deserves opportunities, no matter where they come from. He paused, fighting back tears. But the greatest transformation happened within my own family. My father and I relearned how to see each other, to value each other, to work together for something bigger than ourselves. As they left the stage, they were approached by several business owners eager to learn more about the project and possibly replicate it in other regions. What had started as a local initiative was now gaining national reach. Back home, sitting on the porch with the trophy on the table, Ethan and Michael gazed at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" the young man asked, noticing his father's distant look. "How it all began?" Michael smiled. With a worried businessman secretly following his son, Ethan laughed. "Who would have thought that moment of suspicion would bring us here?" "Life has its ironies," Michael agreed. "Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to our most precious moments." Father and son toasted with orange juice, celebrating not just the award, but the journey they had taken together, a journey of reconciliation, mutual learning, and social impact. That had started with a simple act. A concerned father who decided to follow his son without him knowing, only to discover that his son had far more to teach than he could have ever imagined. The success of the New Paths project continued to grow in the following years, transforming thousands of lives and inspiring similar initiatives across the country. But for Michael and Ethan, the greatest achievement remained the relationship they had rebuilt, a bond strengthened by mutual admiration and a shared commitment to making a difference in the world. End of the story. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more narratives that show how small actions can transform lives. Tell us, what would you do in Michael's place? Your opinion is precious to us.